Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Very happy to be here. My name is Greg Kaufman. I'm with the Atlanta chapter of CAIA, which is the Chartered Alternative Investment Analyst designation. For those of you that are not familiar with the designation, it is for getting up to speed in terms of investing in private equity, hedge funds, real estate, real assets, commodities, etc. And for those of you that are not familiar with it, I'd encourage you to check it out. The material is engaging, interesting, and practical in terms of investment management advice. There's the main designation, and then there's the fundamentals of alternative certificate, which is about 20 hours of studying. And we just launched our Atlanta chapter in February of this year. I'd like to now introduce Jim Beard, who was very kind to step up to the plate at the last moment yesterday to be with us this morning. And Jim has over 20 years of experience in public and private sectors doing investment banking, public finance, financial advisory, treasury, and consulting services. He joined the City of Atlanta in 2010 as the Chief Financial Officer, and he has primary responsibility for the oversight and management of the city's financial condition and advises the mayor on issues such as municipal finance, budgeting, treasury activities, accounting, financial policies, and pension matters. Prior to this assignment, he oversaw financial and administrative support for the city's multi-billion-dollar water sewer system. Previously, Jim was the treasurer for Palm Beach County in Florida and was responsible for the management and oversight of a $4 billion portfolio used to finance the county's capital and infrastructure projects. Prior to entering government service, Jim was an investment banker. He received his MBA from Kellogg at Northwestern University, and I am in particular and am curious about what he has to say. I haven't really given much thought about what a career in financial services or investment management in the public service sector would look like, so very pleased to have him here today. So Jim, why don't you come back? Thank you.
So I thought I'd start out telling you about not just the future of finance, but the future of Atlanta with this short video called Atlanta First to the Future. So can you roll the video for me?
A city full of a determined spirit. A city set on a path to be first to the future.
First to the Future really captures the spirit of Atlanta today, a spirit of innovation, of entrepreneurial spirit and shared purpose, and a city that's on the move as a leader in this country and all around the planet.
What Mayor Reed has focused on is continuing to build the infrastructure for the next 20 to 30 years of growth in Atlanta. We're now at a point where we've sold the big bond issue to make basic infrastructure investment in streets and parks and sidewalks and traffic improvement. He continues to make those kinds of advancements, and when you see what happens to places like Ponce City Market, what's happened to the Beltline, I think they are emblematic of what he's been able to accomplish.
From startups to Fortune 500 companies, businesses are choosing Atlanta. A global gateway booming with opportunity.
I travel all around the world, all around the planet, and I never stop talking about our city, Atlanta, as a wonderful, great place to start a business, to build a business, to raise a family, and even move a business.
There's no doubt that Atlanta is the business capital of the Southeast and more. We are in the hunt with every big move that's happening in the U.S. today.
As Mayor Reed says so well, you can't love jobs and hate the people that create them. So he has been able to create partnerships that have grown employment, and the Atlanta economy is really strong under his leadership.
We're an international company, so it's only natural that we look at the airport. It's a gateway from everywhere, and it makes it very convenient for our colleagues across the globe to be able to get here. But that was really just the start.
I live in LA for about 3 months a year. I have a house there, and about a year and a half ago, I saw them declare a state of emergency because so much film was leaving the city and coming to Atlanta. And what that meant for me is that we'll have a chance to have tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people working in this industry. So being on the forefront of that has been amazing to me. And to have a mayor who understands that, who gets it, who's been fighting for it and making it happen has been really great.
The reason that startups stay in Atlanta and thrive in Atlanta is the talent. It's become our secret weapon. As that job growth moves to high-tech employment types, we need to kind of have that exposure as early as possible to Atlanta's youth. So we just announced a partnership with the City of Atlanta and specifically the Atlanta Workforce Development Agency to create the Code Start School here at Tech Square Labs. And the goal there is to reach underprivileged and underrepresented youth and kind of immerse them in a 12-month curriculum to understand coding and also understand company building and entrepreneurship.
One of the things that Mayor Reed is really committed to is attracting and retaining global talent. And we have so much talent here in the city of Atlanta that we want to make sure that we have opportunities for our bilingual population, for our multi-ethnic population. Through Mayor Reed's vision, we were able to create the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. Mayor Reed saw that Metro Atlanta had the second fastest growing foreign-born population in the nation, and he knew that to be a city of the future, that we needed to do something about it.
Atlanta is breathing new life into its neighborhoods, creating a rich, vibrant community that embraces its diversity and supports its families.
Atlanta has a great quality of life. It is a great place for young people to get educated and stay here, but also to build families all around the metro Atlanta area.
One of the things that makes Atlanta so special, it is a diverse city, and we wholeheartedly embrace that diversity here at Pond City Market. This started out as the old Sears building. The city bought it and really didn't do much with it.
3, 2, 1.
Part of the mayor's brilliance was seeing the need to put it back into private hands. And we saw an opportunity to create an old-fashioned city center almost, a place where people would want to gravitate to.
When you add on things like the belt line, the bicycle lane, the new walkability we have, all the arts and culture here, people just really respond to those quality of life aspects.
Atlanta's always been the jewel of the South. It's always been the city that everybody wanted to come to and everybody wanted to be a part of. It's a great town. It was a promised land for me. When I first got here, I knew that I was home. And here I am, some 20-something years later, still celebrating.
This city provides tremendous opportunities for people to start their own businesses, for people to move their families to the city of Atlanta, for people to really have access to the American dream. And we know, and people from across the globe know, that this is what the city of Atlanta represents.
To secure the future vibrancy of Atlanta, we must invest in our youth. The centers of hope provide safety, education, and character development for our next generation.
Leadership is so critical, and Mayor Kasim Reed has shown the vision, the passion, and the sense of true collaboration, cooperation that's making Atlanta an increasingly positive, dynamic place to live, to work, to visit, and truly thrive.
I call him a friend. He's just been phenomenal, a man of his word, and someone of great integrity, and it's just what the city of Atlanta has needed, and what he's done has been amazing.
His determination is unbending, and his vision for the city rivals the vision that Mayor Hartsfield and Maynard Jackson had and have had for this city. So we are fortunate to have his leadership.
The city of Atlanta is ascendant and shines brightly today more than ever before. We are a global leader in business and innovation. We are breathing new life into our communities and welcoming diversity with open arms. We are still a city that is too busy to hate, but we are a city that is not too busy to love. It's this spirit of Atlanta that propels us to be first to the future. Let's go.
So with that as the backdrop, I wanted to make a 10-point business case why finance and Atlanta are connected and why the future of finance in Atlanta is bright. So I want to start off with a quick example about the Women's Entrepreneurial Center. How many of you have heard of the Women's Entrepreneurial Center? So that's good that a lot of you haven't. So just recently we opened the Women's Entrepreneurial Center in the Flatiron Building. It's funded by the city. It houses 15 women who are driven to make their dreams a success. They stay in the center for 15 months, and they're mentored by some of the best and brightest minds in the city. People like Carol Tomei, the CFO of Home Depot, and Eloisa Clementich, who is the president and CEO of Invest Atlanta. So why is that important? It's part of an ecosystem of entrepreneurs that feed into what you do. So 15 months, come out into the marketplace. What do they need? They need our assistance. They need financial literacy. They need financial products. They need financial support. That's point one. What's next? FinTech. Phase 2 of Technology Square is coming online a few miles north of here in Midtown. It's bolstering Midtown area and Georgia Tech, and it's serving as a hub for millennials. And I just heard the previous speaker talk about FinTech. Once again, financial technology is the future, along with other technologies around the financial services industry. More importantly, it serves as a hub for millennials. The future for Atlanta is the guys and girls that come out of Georgia Tech, Georgia State, Emory, a little further up the street, UGA, et cetera, et cetera. Once again, that ecosystem of talent that helps all of us make money, deploy capital, and have a secure return on our investment. So this is bolstered by other companies who've decided to vote with their feet and invest here in Atlanta. Point 3, companies like WorldPay, Sage Group, Incom, and others moving 1,600 new jobs into not just the region, but in Atlanta proper. Once again, driving forward, pushing forward, more customers, more clients, more future for all of us. Number 4 in the business case, NCR. NCR has invested $250 million in a building, state-of-the-art, world-class building in Midtown. 3,600 jobs, high-tech, well-paying jobs. So that's 4 of my 10 points. Let's go on to Georgia Tech and Georgia Tech's Venture Hub. More than 350 new startups, $1.3 billion in capital invested and deployed through those startups. So now we're up to 5. Why is Atlanta now getting more and more important in the global economy? Think about Atlanta versus Silicon Valley versus New York. Lower cost of living. If all of us know, we have the world's busiest airport by passenger count. Now, if TSA can work on these lines a little bit, everybody will be happy. That aside, we can get to most of the markets that we need to be at inside of the United States within 2 hours, and we can reach most every country with a direct or a one-stop flight. All of that drives our cost of living lower than most other major metropolitan areas. So what we're trying to do here in Atlanta is create an environment where young people who come out of school don't necessarily have to move. They have a great ideal. They get VC capital, they grow that ideal, they get to second stage, they grow some more. Well, what happens when they get to third stage, second, third, and fourth stage capital? What happens? We can yell out. Somebody calls them up and says, hey, we love your idea, but you gotta move. Well, where do you have to move to? Well, you have to come out Silicon Valley or New York. Why? Because there's pools of capital there. One of the mayor's stated goals is to have a Atlanta-focused, Atlanta-based VC fund and a private equity fund to invest in these sorts of ventures so that they become sticky. so that the kids who come through Georgia Tech, Georgia State, and others stay here in the city. So what made all of this possible? The mayor wanted me to tell you about pension reform and to speak to that. The backdrop for all the positive things you've heard in this video started in the first year, the first month in pension reform. Pension reform allowed the city to free up capital to deploy in every one of the things that we talked about before. Pension reform put the city on a stable path forward, and pension reform, even though the unions fought back, was upheld unanimously by the Supreme Court as the proper course of action. And what you'll see now is that throughout the country, most of the major cities that have had pension reform is one of the top 3 issues, are looking at the city of Atlanta as a methodology behind how to move forward. So, tying all of it together, if you look at the future of the city and the future of finance, if you look at the things we've done to provide a backdrop for all of you to work, live, work, and play, if you look at the things that the city has done along with pension reform, if you look at where we've started, in 2010 when the mayor took office, he'll tell you that the city had $7 million in the bank. We've moved the $7 million to $150 million. Once again, giving the city the freedom and flexibility to do all of the things we talked about and to invest and deploy capital, this capital along with $2 billion in pension funds into the firms and organizations that you guys represent. So this has been rewarded in Wall Street with 7 credit upgrades over the course of time. When I first arrived at the city had a single A credit rating, and basically all 3 of its major credits, that's water, that's aviation, and general fund. In March, we went to Wall Street, pitched all of the things that are going forward in the city, and they've come back with AA+ credit ratings across all of the 3 rating agencies. All of those things now has led to these investments in infrastructure that you heard talked about in the video. So the investments in infrastructure start to work on dealing with traffic control, traffic signalization. We all know the only thing second to the lights and the lines at Hartsfield are the lights and traffic signals in the city because we all get stuck in them. So they create this environment, this ecosystem around which all of us drive forward and push forward every day. So that's why we feel that the future for finance in Atlanta is bright, and you are part of that future. So I ended up here kind of a circuitous route. All of you know the mayor was supposed to be here today, and he canceled the last minute. I thought I was going to get to come and sit in the audience and have lunch. He called me and texted me and said, Jim, I want you to go by and make your business case for why the future of finance in Atlanta is bright. I started with a video because it says picture's worth 1,000 words. I figured a video had to be worth more than that. So with that said, I just wanted to put those comments out, but I came to answer your questions, to see what your thoughts were and where we can do a better job to support you and where you had thoughts, concerns, and consternations. So I didn't come with a long list of prepared remarks. I wanted to make a quick business case to why I think the future of finance in Atlanta is bright, and then allow you to ask me questions. So with that, I know people in the room already, so Calvin. So, so the question was basically, how can the city participate directly in opportunities and the city's taxpayers' dollars be deployed locally? So there's a couple things that are going on that front. Some of you may or may not have heard of the West Side Future Fund. The West Side Future Fund is, hopefully it'll end up being plus $50 million of capital that can be deployed in the west side region of the city. So if you think of the new Stadium West, to add to around the issues of redevelopment and transit-oriented development to that side of town. So that's item one. The other side, as I mentioned, is the mayor would like to see an Atlanta-focused, let's call it private equity fund. I don't want to say VC because I don't know where in the capital stack it'll fall in. Fund to deploy capital at those projects alongside other capital to get them going, started, and growing. So the whole notion there is not just to deploy capital for a financial return, but to deploy capital to try to make those businesses sticky so that perhaps the next Google or I think it's Alphabet now, whatever it is, can be based here, grow here, and then stay here. So that's where we're going in that space.
So in talking about culture, what is Atlanta known for in terms of its business? It's education, it's health, it's transport, sports, more recently it's FinTech, and
Right.
film and TV. What does the city do when they're looking to grow a certain sector and say, hey, we want to put resources behind this? And, financial services investment management sector in Atlanta will never be New York. It's a far cry from Charlotte or San Fran, but what can we do to further foster growth in this area?
Great question. So let's start with a little bit of backdrop. Do you know where the city ranks in Fortune 500 companies? Number 3. So we're number 3 in Fortune 500 companies, and the one thing you'll notice about that is there's a diversification. So unlike New York City, all financial services, or number 2, which is Houston, all oil and gas, we have this wide variety of companies that are here, that are based here, and their headquarters are here. So what does that feed? That feeds probably not the first tier investment banking firms, asset management firms, but more the second tier firms. Some of the largest minority-owned firms in the country in those spaces happen to be based here in Atlanta. You may or may not know that. Herndon Capital, is it Vista? Is it Vista? Paul Vieira, what's his? Earnest Partners, okay. So these guys are based here already. So now how do we grow that sector? Invest Atlanta is working constantly with new entrants in the marketplace to see if there's a place that we can help them with office tax incentives, et cetera, tax abatements, office incentives, et cetera, to help get them to stay, live, and grow here as opposed to New York or other places. So that's where the push comes from, through the Invest Atlanta side of the house. Anybody else have any thought? Oh, Calvin again. So the question was around the city being involved in providing startup capital. So money goes where it's treated the best, as you know. So part of the dilemma for the city is when you're talking about pension assets is I got to treat it really well because it's not really my money, it's for the long-term payout for benefits. So we've been very careful about being directly involved in that sort of thing. As you know, the city's gone to an asset allocation model that has some level of let's call it alternative investments in it. But more importantly, that VC fund that we talked about is we're looking, I keep saying VC, private equity fund that we're looking at, we're talking with those Fortune 500 partners about participating in that. So it does two things if they participate. they have skin in the game in the investment side, they're more likely to take calls from small startups that have interesting technology. So one of the ways to get a foot in the door in fintech and in financial services, et cetera, is for that Fortune 500 whose door you're knocking on to already have skin in the game on the other side as an investor. So now if I've got a diverse pool of 13 or so Fortune 500 companies that I can walk you into with the latest technology, you'll probably get a fair hearing. So in some level, the opening of doors has as much value as the access to capital. If you have a purchase order from a Home Depot or a Coca-Cola or some other large corporation, that's almost as good as dollars when you go to the financial sector, particularly if the right structures are in place. So I think we can get to that place by opening doors with the people that we have here, because one of the things you know is that as you start to try to push something new into corporate America, there's some of the hardest doors to open. So if we have skin in the game on one side, the door tends to, and the push of the city behind it, the doors tend to open easier. So that's our strategy for going after that particular part of the business.
Talk for a second about the cooperation and competition that the city of Atlanta faces versus Fulton County, DeKalb County, and the multitude of other cities in the metropolitan area.
So
because a lot of us here probably are not city
of Atlanta employees. That's a fair statement. So the Atlanta proper, let's call it the Atlanta proper, city proper is 500,000 people, let's call it. The MSA is 6 million people. So that tells you the majority of the people live outside of the city that live in the MSA. We try to avoid those inside, outside city limits battles, but what we find is a lot of that is driven by the employee base. So the younger workforce doesn't want to commute. They don't want a car. They want to be on transit. They want to be near an urban center. So past years there was a flight to the suburbs. Now we're seeing influx and infill into the cities. It's got some negative effects. So rent prices are up in the city, et cetera, et cetera. But as a whole, that's really the push. Millennials are making their own decision to vote to not have a car, to not have all the things that go along with a car, and they're coming in on their own. We try to avoid, let's call it inner community rivalries. So I'd much rather see a business move from New Jersey to Atlanta than to have somebody move across a border, an imaginary border, i.e. inside or outside of the city of Atlanta. So we tend to avoid that if we can. Make sense? I mean, it's one region. I mean, that's why as hard as it was to stomach the Braves leaving the city proper, it's really only right up the street. So it's not a good fight to have when you have bigger battles to have. Make sense? What else?
To what extent is the mayor's office and your team trying to get the existing companies and players in Atlanta to work together? Because whenever I think about Atlanta and I see videos, it's always Coca-Cola, Home Depot, Delta, the traditional big players.
Right.
And that makes sense. But if you think about Atlanta, we've got a Federal Reserve branch with a very influential governor, SunTrust Bank, NCR, Intercontinental Exchange. We have a lot of pieces, but it seems to me that we're not, at least maybe I'm not seeing it, getting those people at the table to say, we've got a lot here to offer. And this community, I think, would like to probably see more of that. So what leadership are you guys taking to get those types of firms at the table together?
So part of that, this is a two-part answer. Part of that is when you deal with that many CEOs, it's kind of hard and the egos get in the room. Sometimes you all got bosses. But there is some level of cooperation amongst the group, and I will say it's getting better. My biggest fear is this administration comes to an end in another year and a half. So the real push is going to be who's next. You'll feel that more and more and more. But I think we've gotten a framework in place that all these people talk, some not as publicly as others. So some of the major issues that you've seen the city push forward for, as far as like the $250 million infrastructure bond and those a lot of the backroom stuff was done by people who didn't want their names necessarily on the video. I'll say that on a fairly regular basis, the CEOs and CFOs from most of the major corporations get together and chat about issues that are important to the region as a whole and not necessarily the city of Atlanta. So there's some level of cooperation. It's not necessarily as public as am I getting a hook here to stop? There's some cooperation, but probably not as much as you might want to see publicly, but that's intentional. A lot of people want to stay behind the scenes. And that's fair. So a lot of this is political push, and that's really the mayor's job to push the political side of things. The back stuff, they'll do and they'll help anytime asked. I don't think there's ever been a serious ask that we put forward to a major first tier or second tier corporation where they haven't stepped up to the plate to do what has been asked, whether that's been financial support or some other kind of technical support. For example, through the pension reform process, there are several financial services firms that were in the city that were crucial in helping us understand and analyze reams and reams of data to push that forward in a successful manner. So cooperation does happen. It's just not as public as you might, not as visible as you might want. Yes, ma'am. So, is this for me? You keep sneaking up on me there. Oh, okay, last question. Okay. So, the future of Atlanta as far as lots of building going up, we expect to see that continue. For years, you know, you think about the hole in the ground that's now Buckhead, Atlanta, now it's out of the ground. So a lot of things are changing and growing. Our challenge for as a city is around moving people effectively around the city. I have to be careful about this because now I'm on a political bit. MARTA is not as effective as it could potentially be for a number of reasons. We think that transportation moving forward is a critical part of that. We sit in our office and we imagine what Atlanta looks like, not with the 500,000 or so people that we have now, but what does Atlanta look like as a million-person city? So that means more focus around transportation. That's why the Beltline is important, because the Beltline will be 22-mile loop around the city, but ultimately we hope to have light rail running along that same corridor. So dealing with that last mile connectivity and being able to have, I say young people, but all people move around the city effectively, looking at cross-city connectors to try to get cars like off the street. I drove here today because it's easier for me just to hop in the car and drive, but in other major cities with large populations, I have friends that are my age that literally do not own cars. So we have to get to a place where it is easier to move around the city. That's really where the focus is. Underground, water and sewer we're working hard on that. We're working on securing our water supply with the Bellwood Quarry. Airport, we're working on a $6 billion capital improvement plan, so that'll add, I can tell you all this is all public, a 6 runway and another terminal. So there'll be 2 international terminals at the far end where F is now, there'll be a G, remodeling all of it. So we're working on our part of it. Now the private sector has to decide where and how it deploys around the loop of the Beltline, how it deploys in the inner city, and how it gets ready to have a city of 1 million people, because that's all we think about. What does Atlanta look like with 1 million+ people? I guess I'm getting the hook.